And welcome to the next panel of the International Music Forum Selector Pro 2022. Today we are talking about music and technology and asking if the future is in fact already here. So this talk is brought to you by the British Council Ukraine and Music Export Ukraine, with the aim to strengthen connections between the music sectors of the United Kingdom, Ukraine, South Caucasus, Western Balkans and Central Asia, to create relevant educational opportunities for artists, managers, as well as music event organisers, and to support growth of new talent and promote effective business processes in the music industry. My name is Jennifer Lucy Allan. I'm a writer and broadcaster from the UK with a specialism in experimental underground music, not very much industry where I'm from. I write for The Wire, The Guardian and The Quietus, and host Late Junction on BBC Radio 3. So my three panellists for today, very welcome all of you. I've got Jyoty, who is the voice of Saturday mornings on Rinse FM and a DJ who's played internationally, performing at Field Day, the Tower Fest in the UK, plus Appelsap, Nova Batida, Melt, and many, many other places. She's been the Rinse FM host for 6 years, with her regular shows clocking up over 50,000 plays. And she's also run workshops and taught courses at the South Bank Centre, plus for Red Bull and Sisu DJ Workshop. There's loads of her mixes online, and her Boiler Room debut, it's one of my favourites. It's all killer, no filler, and it's a really, really joyful one. And if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. So I've also got Donna Close here from 5G Festival in the UK, which is a 5G-powered digital immersive hybrid festival experience that showcases creative talent blended with the power of advanced digital technologies. It's broadcast live directly to audiences at remote locations from world-leading venues, and there's also immersive in-venue experiences. So Donna is a strategic consultant with 25 years experience of leadership in arts and culture, working in local government, higher education and arts organisations. She was head of arts at Brighton and Hove City Council, artistic director and producer of the city's White Night Festival, associate producer at Brighton Festival, and one of the founding trustees of the award-winning Brighton Open Air Theatre. And that's just a small bit of her CV. She spent 8 years as project producer for Zap Art, creating outdoor arts festivals nationally and in Europe, is Senior Research Fellow at the University of Brighton and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. So we're really glad to have you with us. My third panellist is Anton Volovyk, Chief Business Officer at Reface in Ukraine. So Reface is a leader in applying artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies for personalised content creation. So the Reface app, if you haven't used it already, I think you're in a minority. It hit #1 in the App Store soon after it's released, was listed among the best apps of 2020 by Google Play, used by celebrities, including Elon Musk, Justin Bieber, Snoop Dogg and Miley Cyrus. And as of October 2021, the Reface app has been installed 180 million times, and users have generated more than 4 billion pieces of synthetic media. Not many then. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to dive right in with questions because we're talking about really big topics, and I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts of what's happening both for audiences and behind the scenes in the industry. So the first thing that I want to talk about is kind of what's right in front of us at the moment, which is the world of sort of post-COVID live events. So, and specifically the sort of growth or emergence of hybrid online and in-person events are. So Donna, I want to start with you as somebody who's got a massive amount of experience in this area. So what are the main challenges that you see when putting together live events that have a hybrid online element?
Great, thanks very much, Jennifer. So yeah, I mean, I'm actually working as a digital culture associate with Brighton Dome Festival as part of the 5G Festival as well. So Brighton Dome is obviously it's an arts and cultural venue in Brighton that was running during the COVID as well, and experience all of those things that venues were across the country. We're also a festival and a music service as well. So it's very much part of the motivation for the being part of the 5G festival was to explore really about how technology can help reach new audiences. I mean, that's essentially what our sort of like a core ethos is how do we work with artists to create new types of experience and also reach the broadest possible audience. And so the 5G festival sort of started. It will culminate in March this year, and it's actually been running for about a year and a half. So very, very interestingly, it's sort of tracked along the sort of COVID thing as we've been trying to continue running a venue. We've ran 2 festivals during that time as well. So the hybrid streaming live, portfolio has really been part of what we've been thinking about and learning a lot. And it's been really interesting to also observe about how, as we started to have these moments where we've got almost back to normal, about how audiences are sort of responding to that. We've seen a bit of a drop off in our engagement with live with the streaming side of things, and a real hunger for people to come back to the live experience. And I think what's exciting about the 5G festival and what we're aspiring to do is it was always about actually, really trying to understand about how you can bring those things together. So how you can use technology to create an experience for a live audience in a venue that is using live streaming technology to really sort of create that sense of sort of liveness, but also creating new experiences for people who might not be able to attend for whatever reason as well. And that's been, I mean, it's a research project. It's not just been something that we could just plug in and play. We've been developing the technology, developing the sort of like creative design of it all the way through it over the last year and a half as well. So it's been really interesting what we're learning, and I think this like idea about what is liveness, what makes live events special. I mean, I think we all sort of know that it's actually a sort of magic that happens, isn't it? And some of that is around the spontaneity of like not quite knowing what's going to happen. Some of that is around the communication that you feel with the artist. Some of it is around the communication you feel with those other people in the room with you, that being in the same time and place. And what we're exploring is about whether 5G with its reduced latency can really try and create some of those aspects, that feeling of immediacy, that feeling of being connected. So connection has become a real sort of watchword for us. So I would say, in terms of like hybrid events, I think that spontaneity, that connection, and also that creativity, because actually, what it's really, really about is whether it's an artist that you want to see and an experience that you want to be part of.
Is there an element where there's technologies coming around the corner that weren't there before COVID for the sort of stuff that you're looking to put on?
Yeah, there is as well. And we're trying not to be distracted from that too much, because a lot of what we're doing in the 5G festival is actually applying a lot of the technologies that you might be familiar with from live events, audio and visual technology, and then just seeing about how we can make that immediate over physical distance. So a lot of the 5G festival is really about that. And actually where the creative innovation is coming in is through the artists we're working with. So we're working with the artist Make Amplify, who like a VJ and artist designer, and we're working with videographer Nick Driftwood, and we're working with them really to see how they can push that existing technology into these sort of new spaces, these new sort of hybrid and physically remote spaces. But then sort of outside of that, I think it's been very interesting. Someone once said to me that COVID has been like dog years in terms of technology adoption, and I think that's really true, isn't it? So we've seen 9 years of experiments over the last year, and I think where we have started to see really interesting growth is in the metaverse and in those sort of VR events, and I expect to see a bit more of that in the future once our sort of live, our hunger for live events has been sated a little bit. I think we'll start to explore a bit more about what's happening in these VR spaces, either with musical, with gigs and artistic experiences in existing game worlds, or actually just creating whole new sort of spaces. I thought Lost Horizon at the beginning of lockdown, which was the guys behind Shangri-La in Glastonbury, I thought that was an incredible VR experience. So I think VR is a real one to watch. And then the other part that I think we've seen a lot of development in particularly in our world in terms of artists, is working with AR as well. And augmented reality is really, really interesting for us as a venue and festival, not just because of the creative possibilities, but also for the additional layers of engagement it offers, and the opportunities it might give for audiences with disabilities, for example, to engage with live events and experiences.
Yeah. So I want to, before we sort of get onto like AR and machine learning and the way these sort of technologies are coming in, I want to talk to Jyoty about, because you're a sort of performer and a DJ, and I want to ask you what your experience of either streamed events or hybrid events has been, and what are the things that you've learned as someone who really started out in hybrid events, actually. What are the things you know about like sort of do's and don'ts, and what is your sort of thinking about how you play to an online and an in-person audience?
Yeah, it's been amazing for me, I guess. I was also, just as the rest of the world, so used to just getting on a plane, walking into a venue, doing a sound check, seeing a number of people, doing a set, how you do a set, and then going home. And then maybe over the next few weeks, you see videos and clips and pictures online put up by other people. Sometimes there's an audio recording. Sometimes there's a film set, like, for example, the Boiler Room, but that's then, a special occasion, or we consider it immediately a press set because it has been filmed. So it's part of, your press tour at that moment. And from one day to another, I got a phone call from my manager saying, I think you need to prepare for not DJing in real life for 2 years at least. He had done immediately a whole research on pandemic. I'm glad he said that, because even now, I'm supposed to be playing France and Austria and Belgium and the Netherlands for these 4 weeks. So I'm not working for 4 weeks because all those 4 countries have closed their clubs. And I'm okay because I prepared myself for this to go on for about 2 years. So it didn't take long before I thought, IG Live, I've spoken on it before, but I'm in my living room. I've got my decks at home. Let's see what we can do. And then out of pure boredom and just longing to connect with people without risking anybody's health or mine, I started doing these DJ sets on IG Live. We called it Club Jyotiana on Saturdays, and it became a whole thing. People could dial in and do a shot with me, and we had people requesting for songs. And, because you can type on IG, you could tell. I didn't even have to always look at the screen and pay attention to what was going on. Then soon after, I discovered Twitch, which is mostly known as a gaming platform, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I started seeing a lot of American DJs like Jazzy Jeff. They were streaming DJ sets on Twitch. And I think after about 6 months on IG Live and getting taken down because of, copyright issues, etc., I moved to Twitch, where the chat function is times 100. And all of a sudden, I noticed that this was connecting people from all around the world during one of my sets at the same time without having to be in the same place or in the same time zone. And what it did was it made me realize that there's this whole group of potential listeners and just humans I can connect with over the same interest that we have, that not only I can't connect with physically because of the pandemic, but some of my very loyal Twitch followers are parents. They have 2 kids already. Recently, on one of my Sunday streams, our favorite couple in the chat announced they have a 3rd one on the way. And, it's been a year and a half. So we're really invested in their lives. And I don't know what they look like, but I can tell you the color of their fridge, because they always talk about their fancy new fridge, and we're all really excited. And them being in their 20s and having a 3rd kid, even if I were to come to their city, they can't afford a babysitter. I also have people in the chit chat who are bound to a wheelchair. I also have people who do not live in one of the main big cities of where you would play when you visit a certain country. And that really made me want to connect with my listeners in a way that I normally wouldn't even do physically. Because when you play a set in a club, well, it depends. Americans love to talk on the microphone. I, however, am a very European DJ. I like the music to do the talking. So I'm not actually speaking to people. You feel a really close connection and you hope that the message is coming across. Whereas when you're doing virtually, you can actually play however you want to play. You can sit down at your kitchen table. That's what we do on the Sundays. You can grab the microphone and you can ask how people's days were. And you can ask what happened at that job interview. And all of a sudden, you're so much deeper into someone's life. And what I notice now is also everything that I do outside of music, these people are very involved and they care because we've built this very intimate friendship without a FaceTime or an actual phone line. But we have the feeling that we've gone through this pandemic together. And throughout this pandemic, we've all kept each other sane. And I think that's the main different way of connecting to your audience if you were with them in a club space where the music is super loud. Even if you were to say something, people can't hear you. Not always, but a lot of people can be intoxicated. And it's dark very often. There's different rooms, all these things that we had kind of accepted as normal. But now that has completely changed for me to the point where when now I'm back on the road again, DJing, and I get my manager to ask promoters, can she stream this set? And it doesn't feel the same because during those streams, I'm still actually DJing in a club. So I'm not shouting down the microphone what I had for dinner.
And there's a fundamental difference there with your sort of rinse shows in that you're in conversation, so you're getting like immediate responses from a community rather than an audience talking about you in a chat room, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think what this has done, it's broken down all the different ways of output that we have and how we can diversify them and how every different outlet serves a different purpose. So now for me, the rinse, the online stream, and the physical DJ set are completely separate entities. Mm-hmm. And I go into preparing, but also afterwards analyzing them in a completely different way. And I have different almost analytics I'm looking for, different statistics, different numbers. It's not, oh, did we sell out the last release in 24 hours? But it's more, what did people say to me in a private message on the streaming platform afterwards? It's not the 500 tickets you were looking for, but it's that heartfelt message. And now with the radio, it's a different thing I'm looking for. I'm wondering if people are asking for track IDs and sending emails about certain songs I've played. So that's really different.
Do you think that those sort of technological aspects that have developed these different communities then affect you sort of creatively? So do you feel like you can perhaps experiment or play more out there stuff, whereas you have more of a remit in your other places, or you're in a club with people, so you've got to play the big tunes sort of thing?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think what it's done, it's gone both ways. One, for example, when I'm live streaming, we have all the freedom in the world. So if I want to focus on an entire Saturday afternoon on a specific genre that's emerging from South Africa and have moments where I talk way longer than I would on my radio show. I mean, on my radio show, you can be quite educational as well, but the stream is all you. And if people don't like it, they just close their laptop, they close the tab. Like, it's not a big deal. But what it's also done is I have become a lot more comfortable with storytelling on the streams, and I'm kind of implementing it a little bit more in my live sets as well, because a lot of people now are also aware of the stream, so they've caught at least one, so nothing really catches them by surprise. So it is interesting. I think it's as a DJ compared to maybe another version of a talent in the music industry, it's definitely given me more opportunities of how to storytell because I don't make music, so it's never my own music telling the story. I'm using other people's music to tell the story, and I think this gives it an extra dimension of how deep I can go.
So there's two things I want to pick up from this, and actually probably the thing that I want to ask both Donna and Jyoty about is the challenges of monetizing the sort of streamed content, and whether you see certain communities up for sort of paying for content, which ones don't, what technologies are helping you do that in a better or more efficient way, and what models are working for you. And then maybe Anton, if you have any comments on this, I know like you have quite a lot of knowledge about this, then feel free to chip in.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I mean, it's such a good question, Jennifer, and I think it's the other thing that's been part of the learning, isn't it? It's not just been about the technology and the engagement; it's also been about the monetizing aspect of it. So there's a strand of the 5G festival that's specifically looking at that, actually, because it's a research project, and that's led by one of the partners, which is Warner. So of course, you know, they really know their stuff about that and how it compares to other models. The other thing I'd sort of highlight is there was a really good report that the Music Venue Trust produced over the pandemic, which was really sort of looking about some of the challenges around streaming and about monetizing it, you know, and licensing. I mean, we've seen quite a lot of like crazy stuff when you think about it. You know, when PRS, you know, produced that really big sort of, tax on live streaming, and there's particular regulation around it. I mean, it's complex legally and financially. And I think, you know, gosh, you've got to be an optimist, haven't you? Because it does feel to me like there is an opportunity maybe to see if there can be a bit more equitable funding model and ownership licensing model around streaming events that benefits our artists a bit more. It would be interesting to see how that emerges, and the same with the metaverse stuff that I was talking about as well. You know, it's been really interesting to see how many how much money is going into that, and that's being seen as a new sort of like license platform as well. But I really like what Jyoty was saying about like it's good to understand from your own perspective as an artist about what the benefit is from each of these different things, actually, you know, because sometimes it's not about the direct monetizing in the instance. Sometimes it's about building a community that will have, you know, it will have financial benefit for you elsewhere, you know, either by increasing people who will buy your stuff, or creating new contracts for you, or people who will come to your gigs as well. So I don't think we should just see it as transactional all the time, because I think it's complicated. But gosh, you know, that's greater minds than mine are sort of struggling with that at the moment. It'd be really interesting to see what pans out over the next few months.
If I remember rightly, that Music Venue Trust report, which was made by, for anyone who's not sure what that is, there's an organisation called the Music Venue Trust in the UK, and they do a lot of supporting of sort of grassroots music and music venues and things like that. And my main takeaway from that report was that the monetization is a real problem for emerging artists. If you have a brand and a name already, people will tune into your set. But if you're the support, then it's really hard to get engagement and to monetize your content. But Jyoty, do you have any?
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. It is something I'm still trying to figure out, because, I mean, the first year was great because the whole world was in lockdown. So every stream was busy. And I know that I've been talking a lot about Twitch, but for example, there's also platforms like Mixcloud Live. And I guess Mixcloud Live actually is the most copyright issue free of all, because I used to work at Mixcloud actually when we went into the pandemic. So I was there at the start of the development of that platform. But what and
they have a blanket license, don't they? Unlike SoundCloud and other platforms, so you can play whatever you want on Mixcloud.
Yeah, they have deals with all the major labels and the umbrellas basically that are above any type of bigger corporation you could get involved with, essentially. But I think what I immediately struggled with at the start was the fact that you can tune in without having to pay. So then how do you get comfortable telling someone that it would be great if they either tip for a one-off or subscribe for a monthly amount, because when you're playing somewhere in real life, they've already done that, and you don't have to have that conversation with anybody, and that's already dealt with on your behalf, or else you wouldn't be there at that point, basically. And this is now that we've come out of the global lockdown, there's 1/6 or 1/4 of the amount of people that normally would be in a stream. And you also know that people are also gone back to clubbing and spending their money in a physical space. And I'm also not as reliable. I'm not doing the same type of streams 3 times a week because I'm on the road. And I actually, to be completely transparent, this is something I'm struggling with because I want to continue to stream. I don't want to give up on streaming. Point blank. That's one thing I've learned. My manager and I have agreed on this. It's a great thing for my mental health as well. You can still play music and be connected to people without traveling. I'm type 1 diabetic, so this lifestyle I've chosen is not great for my health. And this does offer solutions where you could say, for example, once you're big enough, quote unquote big enough, hey, I'm going to take 1 week of every month off because that's the week I stream. But when you're not, a Carl Cox, where if you announce you're doing a stream, 500,000 people want to see you no matter what time of day, it's really difficult. And I actually haven't figured that out yet. So that's also why I find conversations like this really interesting, because we aren't moving away from this model anymore. Yeah. So how do we incorporate this into a substantial way of surviving off of your work? Because it is, it can cost a lot of money. You do have to invest in it.
I wonder if, Anton, you as sort of chief business officer at Reface, and what you as a company have learned about these sorts of what technology offers in terms of different funding models, which ones you find work, which ones don't.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So actually, it's very interesting to hear different perspectives, right? Because I'm coming from the tech world, and we're thinking more kind of from the company standpoint, how we can kind of empower all the creatives in the world. Because basically, the original mission of Reface is to empower content creation with ML technologies, because we believe that many more people are creative, but it's hard for people to get into the creative mood because the barriers are too high. And Therefore, with ML technologies, and currently over the last year and a half that we've been playing more with the video content, but we're kind of simplifying people the entrance to the creative economy, which is extremely interesting. And what we see kind of from strategic company perspective is 2 problems. So the first one is that over the last years, the platforms get too much power over the industry overall, and it's a very big problem, right? Because basically, music creates a lot of value because people want to pay for it. People want to spend time on it. It's a big part of the attention economy. But the thing is that most of the money still stays with Facebooks, Googles of the world, right? That's the first big problem. The second one is also this big label houses, which also build their monetization model in such a way that actually the person who creates the music and who performs gets peanuts of what's being earned, right? And what's happening now, I think, also with the help of quite abundant capital and venture capital space, is that many people are trying to tackle these problems from different fronts. And I think we see improvement there, because every year more and more new companies emerge which help artists, for example, to record, to manage their finances, to go direct to fans. I think a very good example is Substack, which is a newsletter. It's not very music related, but it enables journalists, for example, to spin off from the big houses and earn directly with the engagement of the fans, kind of bypassing the strong platform intermediaries. And I think the industry is changing for the better, but there is still a lot to be done, right? The thing we see is that the big platforms, at least trying to launch creators funds, which kind of help a little bit, but still doesn't solve the problem, because they do not allow different creators, not just the musical ones, to make a living. They just help a little bit. And the other thing is also kind of the very big inequality in probably every creator space, right? So the top 1% gets 99% of what's been earned. And I think this is the other problem, that either the startups or the big companies which would be pressed by the ways of the startups should change going forward.
Yeah. Are there any specific startups you were talking about, like lots of people looking to solve these different issues from different fronts? And are there any in particular that you have seen that perhaps like is in music might not be aware of that are relevant to the music space?
Yeah, so one quite interesting, which we're trying to collaborate with, it's also an Andreessen Horowitz-backed company. It's called United Artists or United Masters. I always mess this up, but basically the idea is that this company helps you manage your work, and it covers a lot of things which label usually covers for the artists, and obviously the fees are way lower, and there is a much basically lower paycheck that you need to pay them to the industry incumbents.
Nice. So there's something that I want to try and talk about access before we go, but also I'm aware that we're talking about the future of technology. And Anton, I was reading about Reface yesterday and I came across your AI generated musician. So can you tell us about that and what it was about? And also I'm interested in, with this machine learning, which artists did the AI create that you had to put in the bin?
Yeah, so Reface first is giving the artist a very big distributional platform. And again, we were created, first of all, in mind to entertain the casual creator, not the creator like Jyoty, for example. So it's a very different use case, but the big musicians are also benefiting from our platform. So we have around 20 million monthly active users who come to Reface to enjoy different machine learning techniques, how they can modify content. And many artists, I think over the 100 already reached out to Reface and launched their like piece of a clip or a video on the platform where the fans can come and interact with this video. And it's been very effective. And our platform, basically, the idea is that a piece of video can be modified with the different types of machine learning technologies. So original one is the face swap, where you basically a face swap on a video. The other one is the animate image, where we can make the kind of like in Harry Potter, the painting start to move. The other one is the lip sync. And basically with all the help of this ML toolbox, a fan can come and interact with the piece of creation of the artist they like. And it's very viral as well and helps artists to create the content, create engagement, and spread out to different social media. Actually, the co-creation with the fans, which is probably much more useful just versus like another post from the artist, right? Because you engage with the fans on a much more personal level by contributing to co-creation. And of course, we're still in a pretty rudimentary level of machine learning technologies. You can do a couple of techniques at Reface. I think we have 7 now, but going forward, the technology is scaling a lot. And therefore, I think if just to imagine in simple terms, you can create like kind of interactive game-like experience with your fans, and it's the other way to kind of stay relevant and create value for the fans, which you can potentially also monetize and just be happy as you're giving something to the fans more than just the music.
What sort of ways do you see it, like in the future, in sort of perhaps 5 years, AI and machine learning technology? How do you see it being used by musicians and DJs?
So it's very interesting. It's very hard to predict because even 20 years ago, the futurologists predicted that by 2020, we would have robots doing everything, and it didn't happen. So it's very hard to make these predictions. What I hope will happen is that AI would help people live more meaningful lives online. And at least my opinion is that I don't want people to spend more time online than they do now, but I want this time to be more of a high quality, an opportunity to interact better and stuff like this. So this is the first point. And the second point is obviously of anything which happens in the world, there's a good and bad side. And what I really don't want to happen is AI taking over creative passion of people who currently produce music, who think about the new songs, the lyrics and stuff like this. So this stuff I hope will not pick up, or at least will not get very big spread. But on the engagement side, I think AI can do a lot of things. And also going back to Donna's point about metaverse, I think a lot of things would be actually evolving in the 3D game-like worlds, as we call it, metaverse.
Yeah, in what way is sort of AI or machine learning technology coming into what you do at the moment, Donna?
It's interesting actually, because we're sort of starting to explore some partnerships with because I mean, what's been really interesting is listening to Anton then as well, was this whole thing about, like, you know, the importance of trying to find ways for creators and artists to engage with the stuff. And I think AI and machine learning is a really interesting area because, you know, obviously one of the challenges around it is it carries forward a lot of the biases from wider society, and particularly from the tech industry in terms of diversity, you know, on all levels. And I always feel that, like, actually the way that you counteract that is by getting the widest possible sort of community of artists, the diverse amount of artists, diverse in every sort of sense of the word, to engage with it and to challenge it and to shape it as well, you know. And that's where I really see a role for something like the Brighton Dome and Brighton Festival, is to try and put together the partnerships and the funding so that we can create, actually, rather than just having the sort of attitude of the technology's there, just go and use it, is to try and create sort of programs where we can take like curated diverse artists through learning and creating work in this in AI and machine learning. So we're looking at a couple of partnerships to do that as our next project after the 5G festival, actually, because I think it is a really interesting area, particularly in terms of, like, thinking about the sort of world we want to live in, I guess, you know.
And that future world has, like you said, there's a really crucial thing that there's an artist called Jennifer Walsh who talks about this a lot, which is that if we want to sort of create the sort of future we want to see with AI and machine learning, actually the past is really important, because we're feeding in those bodies of knowledge with which those algorithms are training. And if you feed in a biased body of knowledge, which is kind of a lot of present day bodies, you know, if you train something with like Beethoven, it's going to make Beethoven. But if you train it with a very diverse range of composers, you're going to come out with something which is much more interesting and potentially like diversity musical in the way it sounds, and there's much more potential for invention there. So it's about the way we deal with the past has a lot of bearing on the way we deal with the future comes out in terms of these AI and machine learning technologies.
Yeah, and it's very interesting as well. And Anton, you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong on this as well, but because I'm not a tech, I'm not from a tech background, but because I've done a lot of work in terms of thinking about technology and the impact of sort of technology as well. You know, by definition, it's quite binary. You know, so it is about, you know, one of the problems with AI and machine learning is it's adversarial, it's binary. And there's a really brilliant artist called Jake Elwes who did a fantastic project around face recognition, which was focused on drag queens, because it was confusing. You had to train it that there was these things called drag queens that weren't a man or a woman, you know, because AI can be quite reductive in terms of like its interpretation. And I think that's really, you know, the more you can create artists, you can engage with artists who play in that sort of space conceptually as well as technically, you know, the more interesting it is for everyone.
Yeah, Don, a very good point. Just to follow up, I think AI is really good in sort of kind environments where you just need to analyze the data and produce the result. And music, like business decisions, it's wicked environments where you have a lot of variables moving on. You cannot actually analyze everything precisely, so it's not pure math. And here, obviously, AI doesn't perform as good as in the other environment.
So there's something else I want to pick up on before we sort of, I want to wrap up with a nice positive question, but to ask you all about access, because it seems to me one of the most important developments that was sort of accelerated by COVID and live events becoming online events or hybrid events was access. And Jyoty, you touched on this, that like people who wouldn't usually be able to come to shows for whatever reason now can engage and can actually see a DJ set in a way that was there was only a handful of them around before, or the technology hadn't really caught up with live streaming. So is that access something, I suppose I'll ask Donna first, like what are those things you've learned about Access, and are you looking to sort of keep them? And what is the feedback from audiences been?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think Access is, I think that is a real area where you hear a lot about how technology can sort of change the world and make the world a better place. And I think Access really is the space where you can start seeing that happen already. And that's where the people who can't or don't want to attend the event. I mean, the other thing we've learned during COVID is that maybe we can function without jumping on planes every 5 minutes. There is a climate emergency. Maybe we do need to think about, like, how can we take part in things without actually physically going to those spaces. So there's that aspect of it as well. There's the access for people who aren't physically able to attend events for their other reasons. But I think I mentioned earlier as well, I'm really interested about the possibility of sort of access technologies within physical spaces as well. The immediacy of having surtitling, for example, or like haptic technology that enables people who maybe are deaf or hard of hearing to feel the music. There's some really interesting startups and technology out there which are really focused on that. Like, how can we level the playing field in terms of the opportunity for everyone to experience the same quality of thing, even if it's a slightly different thing. I think it's a massive area of growth and importance. It's really important to us. Really important to us, and it's why we've continued to do streaming. Is exactly because of the impact it has on people who aren't able physically to come to the venue because of disabilities.
Yeah, Jyoty, do you see that sort of learning trickling down into physical club spaces as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think we could already start seeing this pre-pandemic. I mean, but even take it outside of music, we were seeing this in sport a lot. You had tiered ways of taking in a big football match. You could be inside the stadium. I was at one of the Champions League finals outside the Madrid stadium. I mean, I was in the city, but I couldn't make it in, so I was outside. And then there's also the option of seeing it from my sofa in London. And I think actually exactly what Donna just said, it's not only about the technology that's become available to us to connect people who are nowhere near each other in the physical space, but also who might be in the physical space but do not normally get the full experience. How can we enlarge or just like spruce the experience for them? And this could be in so many ways, whether that has to do with certain disabilities, but also what can we explore? Like maybe someone like myself who is able-bodied and can hear fine, maybe there are some extra ways to heighten what I could potentially feel. I'm a short person, so if I'm not at the front at a concert, I don't see anything. What are some ways that we could bring technology into, these things that we never really had to think about until we're forced to be in these positions? And I also think, again, pre-pandemic, there was already rumors going around the internet that Boiler Room had bought a VR clubbing space. It never came to exist, but those conversations were there. And I wholly agree with Anton that with everything that's great, there's going to be, someone's going to abuse it to a certain point. But I think we can't escape that one. So instead of worrying about that too much, I think how far we have come since I was a kid and I first, Napster and Kazaa became a thing, and how we, and we've turned those all into kind of business models that can work for people if we hone in and zone in on the positive effects it can have for creators, just like how TikTok has created some of the biggest artists. I mean, BBC's Artist of 2022 is Pink Panthers. It's a 19-year-old girl who made 90-second songs on TikTok that went viral. And 3 months ago, I was at her concert around the corner. And for me, that was, I could understand it, but I could only think, take what's happened to her, which is not so much to do with the metaverse or with VR, and to combine the two, what she's already done with machine learning and with, she doesn't know how to maybe produce her own music to a certain extent. It only started off as a joke. Maybe these are all technologies that could help an artist like that I mean, she's under a major already, but what if she didn't want to? These are all things that could help someone like a Pink Pantheress have probably more control and ease herself into this big, scary world of the professional music industry. And then also in the same way, connect with her fans who found her online, to continue keep finding her online, but also get closer to her online. So I think this is a whole world out there that is so exciting. And if we find that right recipe, it could bring power, control, and money back into the hands of these creators, which I guess is what Anton was just touching on as well. And it's an ever learning experience and procedure for all of us. I went to a very interesting talk 5 years ago about radio and AI when streaming playlist algorithms became really big. And the question was, will someone like yourself become, no longer needed because someone can, the algorithm on Spotify knows what this person will like. And the thing is, no, that will never happen because the algorithm won't speak to you about a song the way I speak to you about it, because that's just made up on the spot and that comes from my feelings. And no algorithm can tell you how I felt when I heard the song at 3 a.m. on a romantic walk in Paris. As soon as I mention that, the whole song is already different to you. So I think we need to not worry about the dark sides because we can't escape them, but we can not choose to focus on them and make them work for us.
And obviously also around the corner in terms of the monetary stuff is sort of blockchain technologies and a lot of Web3 stuff, which is in, I don't know, maybe it's closer than we think. But just to finish up, I would like you all to recommend one piece of technology that is essential to your toolkit that you think more people should be using or should be using better.
Gosh, that's a hard one, Jennifer. I'm not going. I'm going to.
Or is there anything that you've heard about that you are excited to see develop?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out instead to a really, really brilliant pre-startup. Absolutely.
Great.
Like one of, if that's okay.
Yes,
so a fantastic artist in Brighton called Mafjay Alvarez, who's set up a VR startup, an all-female collective where they've taught themselves code as well as a way to try and sort of empower themselves to create things. And they've created 2 projects which are really worth checking out. Sticky Bits is one of them, which is a sort of VR space which is absolutely around creating a space where people can come and be part of that VR space and create and engage in community. They run game shows in there. It's fantastic. But also more relevant to this, a new project called Delicious with the artist Bunty Looping. They've been co-developing it together, and it's a VR sort of musical like soundscape that Bunty creates live, and then you in VR walk through it. And so I'm going to give a shout out to that because I'm going to spend a bit of time trying to see how we can build them up a bit more. So Limbic Fish is her website, but that's my shout out.
I don't have a very clear-cut answer to this, but I think the most realistic one is, I think for everyone watching, if you have even a little smidge of interest in this world and you are either a broadcaster, a DJ, or a musician, or even like a podcaster, please look into this world, because I have seen people find their happiness, their audiences, they kept their sanity, but also just kickstarted their entire careers. And you're never too young, you're never too old. I barely understand some of the stuff I'm doing, but I learn while I'm doing it and I'm having fun. And I think the more you fight it, the more you might miss out on really great opportunities. And I think don't be afraid of it not being real and losing, this human connection, because we're currently living in a world where we've never been more far apart, but we've also never been so close to each other. And just because it removes you from the people that you're physically closer to, it brings you closer to people that you normally never get to be in a room with. And educate yourself on this, because I think it's not the future, it's actually now. And so many exciting things are happening. I mean, I'm even, the whole like Travis Scott and Fortnite concert, that blew my mind. I had never had more interest of DJing in a game until I saw that. And, you know, you couldn't have sold that to me 2 years ago. And now it's what I want. So if anyone's watching, hit me up. But I think, educate yourself on this. We have so many tools available. Just go on YouTube. There's so many people explaining this into detail, and find what works for you.
Yeah, find what works for you, I think is key. Thanks.
Yeah, and I really want to continue Jyoty's thought. I think people are generally risk averse and they like doing things that they have been doing for ages. But actually, the most exciting growth opportunities, new experiences are coming from the territory which a lot of people are still hesitant to kind of believe and explore. So yeah, completely agree with the advice of try to dedicate some time for exploring new things, and it will pay off 100% in terms of emotions, happiness, and even monetary results as well.
Great.
Or can I give one more? Can I give one more shout out? As I just read what Jyoty was saying as well. It's also part of the 5G festival, of course, because all the best festivals have an alternative stage. We know that. That's where the most exciting things happening. And we have alternative stage at the Brighton, the 5G festival, which is basically, it's almost like the Great Escape modelled in VR. So it's 5 different Brighton music venues in VR where, Jyoty, you can come and DJ. We've got loads of talent who will be appearing in that space.
Great.
I'm there, front left. Come and find me.
All right. So massive thanks to my panelists, Donna, Jyoty and Anton. And thanks to you all for tuning in. This has been, I've been Jennifer Lucy Allan. This has been Music and Technology. Thanks very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.